Welcome to Your Brain On. I'm Krista Gerhard.
And I'm Karen Foster.
Well, Karen, summer's over. You just got back from a nice 2-week vacation. I hope you're well rested. I've never seen more bounce in your step from a virtual perspective, that is. Um, Curious, what'd you do while you were away?
Well, thanks, Krista. Appreciate that it's trickling over the glow. I read a lot, got a great some time with my kids, got away to the beach for a little bit, so it was wonderful. I was a bit ambitious on the number of books I would read. I bought about 14 before I left. I did get through 5, and one of which was a showstopper called The Autonomous Learning in the Workplace, put out by the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychologists. So some other ones were a little bit lighter, but this one was quite interesting.
Yeah, sounds like a page turner.
Yeah, it was. It's light reading on the beach. I can't tell you enough. It rivals the dictionary in interest and plot. So it was really exciting.
I can imagine James Patterson doesn't have anything on that book. Very relevant for our organization. Has it informed any of your thinking, either for Salient Learning or even maybe for our upcoming webinar that we have?
Yeah, it did somewhat, because I know for that webinar, COVID-19, then, now, and what's next, which, as you know, is coming out September 29th. And so excited to talk through that with one of our colleagues, our clients.
Well, it's good that you've had this break. You're now, adjusted to work life again, and we can start talking about some of the challenges that we're facing, not only internally, but then across our client base. So maybe what we can do is spend a little time today discussing the beauties and sort of the opportunities that COVID-19 has allowed the pharmaceutical, the life sciences industries to focus a bit more on learning and development, on these periods of downtime when customer-facing field teams aren't allowed to be in the field, or maybe there's rolling outages depending upon what state you're in and what status of COVID-19 situation you're in. Everybody's looking for opportunities to develop the teams, develop our own abilities, either knowledge, skills, etc. What are you seeing right now when you're talking to clients with regards to what types of learning they're investing in most often?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and it's really exciting that there is the time in some way to see the glass half full from that standpoint. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners online would agree that the majority of the modality is virtual learning. I can't say how many emails and so forth, and we've talked about it on this podcast, and as well as many blog posts on best practices for virtual instruction, which is really exciting, not only for all of us as professionals, but to transfer those skills when we help our children if they are hybrid learning from home, and keeping them positive. But the virtual, the explosion of the virtual classroom and as a percentage of, the learning modality that's used has just been, astronomical, of course, in the past 6 months. And probably, I would guess, represents about, 80 to 90% of the primary modality that's used to help teams learn, right, and grow those competencies and skills. I don't know if you would agree.
No, definitely. I think there are opportunities, though. What we're seeing so much of is, we still want the feeling of live training. We still want the feeling of bringing teams together. But we, best practices recognize that there's only so much information that we can include in one virtual session. There's only so much, information or times that we want these folks in a virtual room, because we all experience the same fatigue,
Definitely.
So I'm curious your opinion if there's other modalities that as an industry, the life sciences or clients that we work with should evaluate to supplement some of this virtual instructor-led learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to my page turner book that was edited by Jill Ellingson and Raymond No, talking about autonomous learning, that really goes to really focused on self-directed learning. And the two researchers pointed out that, pre-COVID, uh, really just because of the time organizations didn't have to dedicate to classroom training, right, physical classroom, that was really sort of being minimized. What's been seen is the increase of self-directed learning. It's supplemented by growing evidence of this type of learning, where an individual becomes sort of responsible for whether it's consuming a e-module on their own, or e-modules, whether it's being provided access to books on tape, or resources in terms of listening and absorbing content through auditory means. And basically just giving the individual a lot of control over how they seek out resources and assets to help them learn, and also sort of informal just workplace interactions, right, where you're working on say an Excel spreadsheet or something, or perhaps you've had a tough conversation with a customer as a representative, and you seek out a mentor or a peer and have a discussion about that. So self-directed learning had really been sort of become a lot more of the focus, where the individual learner is sort of put in the position of power to find those assets and seek them out, and then monitor their learning and adjust their future behaviors.
Interesting. So in a world where we see so many of our clients struggle to create learning that is autonomous, that is self-directed, specifically because of the legal and compliance guidelines that exist, and our desire to always ensure that we're not putting anyone at risk by training them in a certain way. What are some of maybe even the things that our folks listening might want to consider when evaluating the types of self-directed learning, or what it could potentially look like for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you hit the nail on the head in terms of the legal, regulatory, compliance barriers. I think the first step for our listeners, to if they want to diversify their learning modalities, right, and not just deploy everything on a Adobe Connect virtual call, or they want do you want to think a bit more broadly and give the learners a bit more autonomy, like you said. I think the first place to start is in their thinking is which topic would be the most kind of the lightest lift or easiest, right, from a legal regulatory standpoint. So maybe that's a little bit more of the skill topic, right? The skills, or general business acumen things. Perhaps what wouldn't be best for self-directed learning are your disease state or marketing messages or new vis aid type content. But thinking about it, hey, is this skill or knowledge one that's such as a bit more generalist? Is it for their information? Is it maybe about a new resource within the organization? And so thinking strategically, and we talk about this about being a good strategic partner, really have as an L&D professional, evaluate the degree to which a certain skill or a certain set of knowledge content, right, is flexible for self-directed learning.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that it's probably likely that a lot of people consider the primary modality of self-directed learning being an e-module.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that?
Well, it doesn't have to be, right? So there's so many other, anything that acts as that delivers, content and knowledge in particular, right? So it could be a conversation with a peer one-to-one conversation. It could be a Google search, right? It could be a conversation with even a customer conversation, and really asking that customer, hey, do you mind, Dr. Smith, or help me understand. I really see that this is a difficult barrier for you in your business, or not in your organization, or with patients. Help me understand, why is that the case, or give me more of an insight, and really use those particular customers that would expand on that as a link to delivering information and content. Finding the actual opportunities to find content nowadays with the ubiquity of the internet isn't somewhat of the challenge. Really, what researchers in that review self-directed learning, these IO psychologists, much even more, will say is that unfortunately we're not so good at monitoring and self-reflecting on if a learning modality is working for us. Right? It's a bit of that tough love of ourselves of if you're listening to a customer discuss some technical aspect of their world. It really takes a lot of metacognitive awareness to be evaluating how well you're comprehending that information as it comes in. So some of the bigger barriers is not so much finding the content or the modalities, but it's that individuals can feel overwhelmed by the amount of information that is out there. They tend to also skip some critical key questions that they ask. And so there's some things that can, really then as learning and development professionals basically empower those learners on how to learn better on their own, which works not even in self-directed learning modalities, but also in virtual learning or in live classroom, right? By empowering learners to learn how to learn better, they'll do better across the board.
So if we were to potentially think about how we can construct sort of the scaffolding, as we like to say, for self-directed learning, and we were to think about how we want to empower the learner to take this journey, right? It may not necessarily be one that they are essentially comfortable with because they're, historically, they have a path that has been prescribed for them.
Correct. Yeah.
We would say here that self-directed is one that they would be designing for themselves a bit. Is that fair to say?
Yep, exactly. Yes.
So as learning and development professionals, we want our learners to understand what it means. We want to help them understand how to build the process or the journey for themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely starts by encouraging and modeling curiosity. Encouraging and modeling the idea of true knowledge and understand. How do you really know that you know that? And as a learning and development professionals, we act as sort of the flag bearers of those behaviors in an organization, and really truly lighting a fire in an individual to start and be apt to go out and seek out and evaluate that information in their own learning process.
So if we think about, sometimes we historically, again, may have gotten into the habit of, oh no, it's another e-module. Let's get this done quickly. Let's check this box. What you're speaking to is really trying to have an individual become more invested in whether or not they've retained that information, that they've learned something. So in that sense, how would you lead that to, one's ability to evaluate themselves or the organization's ability to evaluate them? I know it's a big question, but maybe there's questions you can ask baseline or post. Maybe there's reflection questions. I mean, where does evaluation come in when we're trying to, help a learner new to the self-directed learning concept to say, here's what I need to sort of walk away with at the end of this journey. Here's how I'm going to measure whether or not I feel like it was impactful for me.
Yep. Yeah. No, and it all starts by, setting a kind of an intellectual goal. I think a lot of the learners, and that would resonate with a lot of, field-facing, customer-facing people, account executives, very driven, very goal-oriented people. So encourage them to set like their intellectual goal, right? And set a learning goal, right? I will master the, ins and outs of the NCCN guidelines for my particular tumor type in oncology by the end of X. And then, that batch of learners would be pretty proactive and latch on to that, I think. So setting that goal first, starting with the end in mind, can help scaffold, like you mentioned, the path to getting there.
And how, as learning development professionals, do you think that we can support the learners in this journey? Like, what should we play? What role should we play?
Yeah, you really become that guide on the side, right? So it can, having sort of a learning coach per se, almost, and if we were to term them as, visualize it as a coaching person rather than sort of a directing person. Um, I think all of us in our personal or professional lives can call attention to when we had a third party, sort of listen to a situation we were in and then have a different perspective and provide some insights. So a learning and development person could really play that role of sort of guide and coach, and maybe make suggestions of a different, alternative places to find assets, content, not encourage people to not get discouraged, that it's, throughout a learning process, there are going to be bumps and there'll be dips and there'll be, hills and peaks. So just to continue to motivate people and encourage them to have that curiosity and persistence.
I think this is also reminding me of the models and frameworks that we give our individuals, our organizations, so that they can do their jobs better, right? You have a selling model, you have an account management model, but we don't talk about the learning model, right? So as part of a potential, opportunity, you teach your folks a model for learning, and you embrace that and you guide them. That guide on the side visual that you provided reminds me more of an opportunity for a coach within a selling model or a coach within a learning model.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, driving at why would we want to do this, and first of all, the idea that self-directed learners can be super efficient, and it's actually a better economic choice for the organization, in the sense that and at the speed that business is going, right? It really gives a nod to, hey, those NCCN guidelines, they get changed, every month, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, right? So if you have a self-directed learner, they can keep up with the pace of information change much faster than, creating thinking of the 3 month, development time for an e-module, right? And so there's a lot of benefits to the organization in thinking about adopting a lot more self-directed learning opportunities.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Brain On. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Krista Gerhardt.
And I'm Karen Foster.
And we'll see you next time.